This is Storyboard.
Welcome back to Storyboard, my friends. I'm Jameson.
I'm Zach, and you're doing a weird radio voice.
Why, yes, I am. Gotta take off the headphones so I don't hear ourselves echoing.
Last time on Storyboard.
Last time we actually we discussed. Let's see, what was our last discussion?
Our last discussion, we actually did an interview between ourselves.
Actually, that would be the episode before last. Because we're ahead one episode.
Oh, yeah, we're recording ahead. We've got a backlog.
Wow!
Let's see, what just got released? The interview with Mike Hahn?
Yes. And then, by this point, the other one that we did, that was the interview between you and I. That we just asked each other questions the entire time.
Yes, we did. It was actually really fun.
It was quite fun.
I did enjoy it, but I have no idea what came before that. Was it the decapods?
Yes, the decapods.
The decapods came before that.
And in between the decapods, we had just before the decapods, we had the What About Us?
Mm-hmm.
Where we described ourselves and everything that we've done.
Yeah. So here we are again.
Once more into the breach.
Yes. I am not deterred.
So this week we want to discuss with you some more of story elements. Now this doesn't mean we're going to talk any specific about each other's story, but we'll talk about elements of each other's story. Now we wanted to discuss ways of using magic or powers.
And how to make magic and or powers believable in the world that you create.
Oh, yeah. So, you know when you're a child and you have a friend and you're constant, like, you like to play...
I didn't have any friends when I was a child.
Oh.
I was all alone.
Oh. Well, people unlike Zach, who had friends as kids,
You didn't have friends either, okay?
Remember when you were a kid and you had a friend that would, you would have little make-believe battles and they would always be like, well, I have a power that does this. And then you'd be like, well, my power beats that because of this. And it just kept going on and on and on.
My friends and I actually played cooperative games against imaginary bad guys.
Well, I'm saying in general, I guess. Speaking to the audience.
Oh, maybe they have my experience and not.
Okay, well, maybe you've had experience with one of your kids or somebody else's kids, all arguing about maybe whether or not they have the more ability than the other kid.
Well, I have a power to usurp what you just said and put in my experience.
Well, my power's infinity plus infinity.
That's still just infinity. You can't math. However, technically, infinity plus infinity is greater than infinity.
Well, that kind of styling of making magic where things just somehow beat each other out doesn't always work.
No, I'm of the firm opinion that if you want a magic system or a power system to be believable, it has to have limits.
There has to be a balance, yeah. There's, life isn't fair. Nobody believes it is. Nobody should believe it is. Because...
You can't tell me what I believe.
Because, nothing goes exactly the way you want it to. And in your writing, if you're doing something, pseudo-serious, any fiction, non-fiction, anything that you want to be taken seriously, you don't want it to just have solutions randomly.
Yeah, it's a really difficult balance. this does not mean that your magic and power system should not be cool.
Yes.
Definitely make them cool.
Now, what do we mean by magic and power system?
So what I determine as a magic or power system is anything in a story or fiction, because usually we don't really have many powers or magic in fiction, in fact, unless it's power of persuasion. It's something superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's I can move a small paper by wiggling my eyebrow, that's technically a power. Good luck writing that one into a story.
I can wiggle papers with my eyebrows.
Good distractions. Make him like a secret agent that only infiltrates office buildings.
Yeah. I'm going to get those financial papers somehow.
Wiggle, wiggle.
Wiggle, wiggle.
So it can be anything as small as that to Avatar, Last Airbender. Manipulating the elements.
Controlling an external force.
Absolutely, and anywhere in between. So magic can be summoning those powers, summoning those elements and things. It can be like in the world of Castaways. The castaways are given they're given different abilities that I would ascribe to be magical.
Ooh.
And then you've got the guys in Eternity Found.
Yes.
Which they are superpowered individuals.
Now, yeah, my guys are very powerful.
Extremely powerful.
Now, I told you that it's not fun when you have just somebody who just beats and trumps everybody else because of reasons. But I like to tap the limits of power, but also give good balancing.
Yeah, and you've done that in a way that these beings that have the massive power really have a very short lifespan.
Yeah, and in fact, it's completely tied to their abilities. If their whole living, their whole existence is tied to this charge that they have inside their body, the same charge that allows them to use their abilities. If they overuse themselves before being able to recharge that spark, then
bye-bye.
they're completely goners. They can't withstand. They can't maintain a physical form.
So when creating a magic system or a power system for your stories, first you need to define what it is you would like to do, what you would like to happen. Once you've got a good feel and grasp on that and the limits of that power, give it checks and balances. In Castaways, my checks and balances are the powers really aren't all that spectacular. They're nothing like, I can control everything. They're just like, water can't touch me when I'm submerged. So if that's how you give your checks and balances, by giving a limiter with the amount of power they can handle, that's a great way to do it. Giving them a very big detriment to using the power is also a wonderful way to do it. Or making the magic system or the power system difficult to use is also another great way.
And then there's also, like I said, my way, where you can make the powers immense, but then you have to give them a sharp drop. Now, let's take examples from stories you may know, stories you may be familiar with. What is, you would, I'm about to go Dragon Ball Z here. What's the power level?
Aang is over 9,000.
Aang, yeah, Aang could be over 9,000, especially when he goes into Avatar state. Now there's a good check and balance in that show.
Exceptional.
That they have the ability to manipulate elements, but only specific ones.
Mm-hmm. And you take a look at Aang, the Avatar. His check and balance is his personality. He doesn't want to use all that power. He's a pacifist. He doesn't want to hurt people. And is given a big emotional detriment when he accidentally hurts one of his friends using one of the powers.
He has a lot that gets in the way, and especially with the philosophies of being the Avatar, such as to achieve a perfect balance with your chakra. With the Avatar state, you have to give up your emotional and earthly connections.
Which is exceptionally hard for him. So great check and balance for somebody that should just dominate everything.
Oh, yeah. And then let's go over to Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Now we're in Britain.
Now this is a series that you could say almost does the, well, whatever I need to do, I have a magic spell that does it.
Which, arguably, you could make that point.
You could very well make that point. But at the same point, this is a general magic. This is something that everybody in the story can tap into for the most part.
Except for you muggles.
Except for you normal people.
No mages.
No matches. Oh my goodness. Why would we ever call them nomads?
Because we in America don't like to do things like Britain.
Of course. They have immense power, but it's up to the individual how they use it and how much they can really tap into it.
Mm-hmm. That's what makes Voldemort such a scary villain. Is J.K. Rowling probably, I'm not saying this is what she did, but she probably looked at the magic system and looked at Voldemort and said, let's remove some inhibitions here. Let's remove some limiters. And his nose, yes. And give him access to something truly terrifying.
Now, there are some wizards in the wizarding world of Harry Potter that can use magic without wands. But that's very special trained people. People that have delved for years and years into this magic to be so powerful.
And those people still prefer to use wands when in a duel.
Because wands help them control things.
Mm-hmm.
Wands are a funnel to that power.
And that's also a great limiter to a lot of the wizards. You just shoot an Expelliarmus their way, and suddenly they're powerless.
So a lot of the great stories uses checks and balances.
To give one more example of someone that I would consider a powered individual, let's talk about the Doctor. Doctor Who. Yeah, I know. So if we talk about the Doctor, he is pretty much immortal. Well, he, she,
It, him,
they are pretty much immortal, and exceptionally brilliant. But they have a lot of checks and balances built into the character themselves.
If you do a character study on him, not only does he have a deep history that prevents him from going past certain bounds and things, he also has...
He has what, Jameson? Do tell, why did you stop there? In the middle of a sentence, no less.
Zach was making...
Zach would do nothing of the sort.
Yeah, he was gritting his teeth with a wide grin. Not only that, he has companions who basically limit him.
Mm-hmm.
That make it so, like, there's many episodes where you'll see that when the Doctor's alone, he tends to do things way over the top.
He goes a little dark.
But when he has a companion, they keep him in check. They keep him doing good things.
You know, I honestly can't think of any story that I have genuinely enjoyed where there has not been checks and balances in a power or magic system.
Now, people would argue Dragon Ball Z doesn't have one.
Now Dragon Ball Z. Did you have to bring up Dragon Ball Z?
It's a good argument point. It's a good study.
It is a very good study. The checks and balances in Dragon Ball Z is honestly a little more childlike, where there's the I have this power now, and then the other guy goes, but I have this.
Very much so. But at the same time, if you look at the series itself, instead of just looking at the pointy hair and the squatting and charging and screaming part of it, you actually see a ladder of things. That there is power that is known. There is power that can be obtained and lost.
And there's powdered sugar that can be placed on donuts.
Donuts. You take each character, and they each have a separate way of climbing that ladder. But at the same time, those characters have their own principles and their own separate things that keep them from achieving those goals. Now, you take Gohan, for instance. He's a studious kid. He
wants to be a professor.
Yeah, he forgets to train because he wants to do this other thing that is still just as good for him, But his father is one who focuses more on training and less on family.
Yep. More on training.
And doesn't make him a great person, even though he saved the world multiple times.
More on training.
More on training. But there's always somebody bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they introduce Goku having this great, amazing power, there's always somebody bigger than him.
But I have this power.
Now I like to quote back in Dragon Ball, because I absolutely love Dragon Ball Z. Goku was going through a tournament, and he was about to win. His master, who has been training him, dresses up as another fighter and beats him. Because he doesn't want Goku believing that he is the strongest in the world. Because if he thinks that, then there's no more reason for him to train.
Goku, strongest there is.
So that's more of a character balance. With amazing out of the world powers, the balance is within the character itself.
Yep. So may all your power and magic creation be balanced. And seriously, if you do so, you'll find that your stories are going to come alive in ways that you never thought they would. And you're going to figure out ways to use your magic and your power in extremely creative ways.
How about right now we create one?
Ooh, sounds good to me. All right, so what do we want this magic system to do?
Now let's see. Should we use items? Should we use a funneling like Harry Potter? Should there be...
I've always wanted to do a rune-based magic system.
I was just thinking the same thing. Something in script.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, it would be really awesome. So if it was rune-based, but it wasn't like, let's draw runes in the air or you write them on paper. What if it was inscribed in the skin? So almost tattoos.
Okay.
And like you could tap a certain tattoo and it would draw forth that power to use it.
Ooh. Now, let's say, like, would you have that be elemental abilities? Would it just be a certain word in a certain language, a certain script written on your arm? If you tapped it, you had that ability of that element or something.
Yeah, it would be cool if it was elemental.
I mean, it could be more than elemental, but still.
Yeah.
That just as a base idea of things. Now, what if, at the same time, for checks and balances on that, getting the tattoo is poisonous to the body?
Oh, that would be really cool. I think we could add another check and balance as well.
Yeah.
That the tattoo fades with how much you use it.
So the more you use it, the more you lose it.
The more you use it, the more you lose it. Plus, each time you get it renewed, you're slowly dying.
You're getting poisoned by it because you keep digging it into your body. Let's say it's so like D&D or like Elder Scrolls. There's words that have power.
Fusroda!
Just by the utterance of certain words, it creates magical effects because these words are ancient and so powerful. Now let's say these people decided that these words are more intense if mixed with their body's own energy. And so they decided when they'd inscribe it upon themselves, they'd have more control because it mixed with their own power. So they're using an outside source combined with their internal energy. But when they connect it to themselves, it slowly draws it out of them. And that's what the poisoning is.
That would be cool. So with that, we have our main person, main magic user, has maybe 2 or 3 tattoos at a time. What if we had a bad guy that has head to toe covered in tats, but the tats are inscribed in him with blades, so it's just scars.
Scarred? Oh, man. How would that be different, though, versus the ink written?
So with that, scars never heal totally, right?
Yeah.
So you always have access to those powers.
Now let's say with ink, ink is a more firm color. It as it fades, the color just lightens. And so therefore ink is the most intense form.
It can be the most potent, yeah.
Yeah, the most potent, but it fades. But when you scar yourself, the magic is powerful, but it doesn't exactly work the correct way because it's a tear.
Yeah, it's twisted.
It's a twisted version. I can imagine just the scarring in the air of the ability. Like if you were to use fire with an ink rune, it would be a pure stream.
Mm-hmm.
But with a scar, it would just be like
Kylo Ren's lightsaber.
yeah, like an unruly spurt of flame that just undulates.
That would be awesome. With this guy having so many scars and things, he's obviously getting poisoned real bad, but there's got to be a check and balance that makes him actually a terrifying villain instead of just a one-off.
Well, let's say somehow he has an endless well of energy inside himself, or maybe as a more he is a connection to that other energy or something.
Maybe. What if he had a rune that nobody else knew of that could heal the poison?
Oh. An ancient word that was lost that allowed people to rejuvenate the energy inside themselves.
And it would have to be hidden somehow, maybe inscribed on his bone.
Ooh. Whoa.
So this man's gone through a whole ton of crap, but...
Man. Yeah. Whew.
You like that? I like that.
I like it a lot. Now, I had a thought earlier. Instead of getting like a tattoo burned into your skin with the ink, what if, you know how we have those one-time tattoos?
Like from the
peel off.
From Juicy Fruits. It's like
yeah.
What's that? Fruit stripe gum.
Stripe gum. So let's say a person doesn't want to be stuck to certain few magics at a time. So you have a character who just carries around these attached tattoos.
Yeah.
or something. Like he has these papers that he slaps on his skin, and it just
get it wet and
him.
Then leave it for 5 minutes. Then
no. Well, for balance sake,
it just slaps and goes.
Slaps it on and goes, and it's a one-time use power.
That would be awesome. It'd be really interesting to see him do that and have him slap things on other people that were almost magnetic runes, so they would pop together.
So he could manipulate it on other people. That would be
Mhm.
hilarious.
So, I almost like the idea of this person for our main character.
Now, I have an idea.
Let's hear it.
So, what if this episode is coming out right before MyCon?
Oh yeah, yes it is.
So, I want to involve our audience. And hopefully at MyCon we can draw a lot more people in. And maybe if we build this world, we can involve people more, our audience.
Hey, that would be awesome.
So let's say, here's our world, here's our power. How does it go? Who lives in it? What happens?
Yeah, maybe let's at our booth, because we will have a booth at MyCon.
Uh-huh.
We'll have a box there that you can write suggestions or characters or things like that and place them in the box, and we will incorporate them.
We won't just use everybody's. We'll take bits and pieces of ideas that stand out, and we'll make it so that you know that it might be your idea. If we use your idea, we'll put it in the credits.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be a world made by you.
Yep. And we will jointly write this story together. We might just every other chapter but we will both be intricately involved in the full story, and we'll do this.
So let's say we have a villain. Let's have people create scenarios, or
Yeah, you can do scenarios, you can do characteristics. If they have a weird little tick, like a nervous tick, you can suggest that. Anything from the really small nitty-gritty details to maybe something that you'd like to see in the story itself, like a big old plot point.
or maybe even a character.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can also make these stories not about a single character other than the villain just being the focal point. And so we could have how many people did this villain affect
That
through
would be
his
awesome.
actions.
I mean, if you want a character that these runes just don't work for them, suggest it.
What other ways would they be able to defend themselves? How would they live in a world of people with runic magic?
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. This story sounds real fun.
I think it sounds fun. Now, things we still have yet to determine about it is time period,
Mm-hmm.
technology,
Mm-hmm.
culture.
If it's all human,
Uh-huh.
or if it's got different other things. I mean, if we're going full high fantasy, are there different races? Do you want those races to maybe be elves or dwarves, or do you want them to be something completely and totally different? It's just possibilities are limitless.
Give us your ideas, give us your suggestions, and we'll add them in.
And if you're not going to be able to make it to MyCon, please make it to MyCon. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're not going to be able to make it, where do we send suggestions and questions to?
To storyboardpod@gmail.com.
That's storyboardpod@gmail.com.
That's STY. Wow. STOR. Wow. I can't spell story.
That's STORYBOARDPOD.
At gmail.com.
.com.
Today, we're doing a story that fits within the universe we just created. It is a possible outcome or a possible event that could happen in the story. We're leaving it up to you to decide on what time period it's set in and who the main characters are. So, during MyCon, we're going to have you guys vote and decide and even create some of the characters. So keep your eyes peeled, I guess, and your ears attentive. Get ready. Come to MyCon and enjoy.
The roar of stamping feet pounding down the cobblestone streets drowned out the fading cry of the homeless mother cradling her sick child in a nearby alley. Without food or wrappings, she suffered in hunger and illness as she gave everything she had in an attempt to save the baby girl. Her strength failed with each unsuccessful reach of an outstretched hand to the strangers that forced themselves to look forward in feigned ignorance. The tapping sound of hard-heeled boots cut through the cacophonous clatter, forcing her tearful eyes to rise to greet the man that now hovered above her. Her weakened, shaky hand lifted with her palm aimed upwards, asking for any help to be given. His velvet jacket crinkled as he lowered his own hand to grab hers. He bent his heavily clothed knee and lowered to look at her near eye level. "Your child suffers," he stated, as he reached his hand toward the chilled infant. The mother drew back at the man's action, protecting the sickly child. He responded by raising both hands to show the safety of his actions. She settled slightly and returned the baby girl to the original position of being splayed against her chest to share the warmth. "Fabric's gone pricey, sir," she gasped through parched lips, her warm breath reaching upwards to fog the bottom of the man's half-rimmed glasses. "Spare some coin to save some heat for my daughter." "What is the child's age?" he asked as he dropped his hand to the insides of his squatted knees. "Barely a year, mister," she stuttered in the frigid cold, her hand staying rigid, expectant of the asked support. His mouth creeped into a smile as he stretched to relieve his leg's strain of maintaining the crouch. "What if I told you I knew a way to save your child?" Her eyes glistened with the first hope she had felt in many months. She, however, bowed her head in shame of her poor state. "I have nothing to give in return." His smile broadened with a chuckle as he reached to pull back the sleeve of his left jacket arm. As the cloth slid upwards, it revealed the deep black of an iron ink tattoo in the shape of a T'd crook. The woman's head tilted as she attempted to recognize the image. "A simple rune, yet uncommonly known." He shuffled forward as he aimed the shape towards the child. "Also uncommonly potent." He pushed his arm forward in a gesture for the woman to touch the tattoo presented before her. She carefully turned over her still raised hand and pointed her finger towards the ink. Her hesitation hung for a long minute before she pressed her finger into the warm skin. The rune began to shine with a simple glimmering glow before she felt the odd sensation of the skin's heat flowing into her own. The warmth traveled up her arm and streamed through her chest and into her heart like a sunburn that lightened the pains and aches of her body. As she heaved in relief, she felt her lips wetten and soften from splits that once had stricken them. She lifted herself from the wall and bounced in excitement with her new energy. "Please, sir, please give this to my child." He put his palm on her shoulder to calm her sudden movements and avoid unnecessary attention. "I can see you're familiar with runic magics." She nodded as she struggled to settle into her newfound comfort. He nodded slowly in return. "This is an ancient rune, nearly lost to time." She rubbed the bare skin of her child's back with her sudden renewed warmth. "Runes of healing are indeed rare, kind sir." "That's the thing, though," he began with his own excitement. He pulled again on his sleeve to make sure the now slightly faded rune was in clear view for his explanation. "This isn't a rune of healing. It's something entirely different, and we've discovered ways that can make this permanent." "Meaning, sir?" She bounced the child that now began to cry upon awakening in the freezing air. "I can make it that your child will never suffer again." He opened his arms to ask for the child to be given. She looked at his open gesture and began to feel the returning emotion of dread. "What would you have me do?" "Trust," he spoke again with his twisted smile only widening. "Only trust that good things are to come." She wavered for a moment before turning the child and handing it to the man, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. He took the girl in a firm grip and held her for a momentary inspection. After a confirming nod, he stood and held the child close with his left arm as he dug into his pockets with his right. He pulled out some notes and dropped it to the woman on the street side, who quickly gathered them up and gawked at the amount stated amongst the papers. "Live well, knowing your child will outlive all of us," he stated before stepping off down the well-traveled stone. Once he was out of hearing distance of the woman, he whispered to himself in completion of his thoughts, "If all goes better than the other attempts." Many years later, the mother could be found in a large multi-roomed home filled with billowing fabrics and sheets of exotic natures. She commanded many maids and servants to do her many difficult biddings to provide her with the utmost comfort. The bell above the door chimed, calling to attention one of the maids, who ran to answer it to avoid the harsh scolding that would follow in action. The well-tended door swung open silently to reveal a young girl who stood in dirt-stained clothing. "Oh, my dear child, what has life done to you?" "Is the lady of the home present?" the young girl asked with a firm voice. "If you look for work, I would advise a different household. Only misfortune follows those who lay claim this fortune." "I wish to speak to the lady," the girl spoke, confirming her intent. "If I may." The maid grimaced her worry. "May I tell her the name of who calls?" The girl's first sign of unsurety seemed odd to the maid as the girl sputtered, "Annalyn." "Very well." The maid turned, the expensive skirt twirling in her motion, and walked up the stairs toward the lady of the house's quarters. A moment later, a tall woman stepped down the stairs towards the open door and dirty girl. She stopped a few steps before the doorway and eyed the youngster that called upon her. "And what would you have of me, girl?" her voice stern and demeaning. "I wish to learn the life of a lady of splendor such as yourself." Annalyn attempted to curtsy, though she wore no dress but suspended shorts and a dirty tank top. The lady gave a half-smile as she felt some familiarity with the gutter girl standing at the threshold of her home. She stood in thought before nodding and waving her hands inward. "Come, child, if you are to be educated, you must have a clean visage." Annalyn's smile broadened as she skipped into the building. The lady walked before her as the maids shut the door and led her to the bathing room. She ushered for Annalyn to discard the worn clothing as she filled the tub with warm water. "Where are you from, child?" the lady asked. "The city," Annalyn stated firmly as she reached to pull off her first suspender. "The city is a vast place, young one. From which part do you hail?" the lady chuckled. Annalyn paused as she looked sheepishly at the woman sitting on the side of the porcelain tub. She lowered her voice to a near inaudible whisper. "Beneath." "What was that?" The lady slapped the side of the tub, making Annalyn jump. "Speak up when talking to your betters." Annalyn's eyebrows crinkled as she felt a sudden fear from the woman she had searched so long to find. "Beneath." "Beneath!" the lady shouted above the crashing sound of the falling water inside the tub as she stood, forming a threatening figure. "Don't play with me, girl. I have no time for pranks." "I don't mean to play, my lady," she said as she turned to face away from the unexpected fright. "You will face me when you speak," the lady shouted again as she gripped the girl's wrist with surprising strength. She pulled the girl's arm upward to force the girl to spin to face towards her glare. Annalyn found it difficult to stare at the face that now struck her with unexpected emotions. The lady was about to speak when she noticed the signs of scarring on the inside of the girl's arm that she held. "What are these?" The lady inspected the scarring to notice images carved into the skin. "Signs of a cult?" "Please, my lady, don't ask about those." Annalyn ripped her arm away and held it close to her for safety. "I will not have some vagrant tearing my home apart unless you can explain these ungodly markings." The lady raised her hand in anger, threatening to hit the girl. "Please, no!" Annalyn shouted as she spurted out tears following a sob. "Don't ask!" The lady moved her hand with sudden speed and slapped Annalyn across the face. Annalyn shouted her cry as the lady gripped her arm once again, her fingers wrapping tightly over one of the scars on her skin. Annalyn could feel the drain of strength as the scarring began to glow. The lady moved her hand away in surprise and struggled to look at the shine of the runic shape. Annalyn reached her hand out toward the lady in fear as she shouted, "Mother, please!" A stream of flame shot forth from Annalyn's fingertips with undulating patterns. The wave of heat lit the lady's dress aflame along with the drapes that hung by the window behind her. The lady screamed in fright at the sudden appearing fire as her skin cooked from the intensity of the flame. Annalyn sobbed as she screamed out again, "Mother, please!" The lady fell in pain as the heat began to consume her. She looked up at the young girl as she recognized the words shouted, and the realization of her mistake and her death were now upon her. The maids and servants fled from the building that quickly filled with fire, sending billowing black clouds into the sky. They watched from the outside as the building crumbled into debris and could hear the screaming of Annalyn calling for her lost mother. The fire raged for hours as the authorities cleared the streets and attempted to fight back the magic-induced flames. Eventually, they had to wait for the fire to die down on its own accord, luckily sparing the buildings surrounding the street. Once the crews were assured the fire had died completely, they explored the ruined skeleton of a home. They came upon a pile of charred bricks and wood that seemed to be laid upon a lump. They dug downward to find the body of Annalyn seemingly untouched by the heat cradled over the scorched corpse of the lady of the house. Annalyn's tears evaporated before falling upon the red-hot glow of her mother's body, though her arms, which were wrapped around it, weren't affected. The authorities couldn't come to terms how she survived unscathed, and after a moment of thoughtful debating, they were caught off guard by the arrival of a well-dressed man in a velvet suit. He stepped towards the girl in the midst of the authorities who backed away from the scene. "You're all dismissed by authority of the Queen." He held up a wallet that shone the seal of royalty. "You've done good work here. Forget you saw this scene, and you shall continue your lives unimpeded." The authorities glanced about before leaving the area without question. The man crouched down to the girl and spoke. "This is where you've gone. Honestly, I should have checked here first." "Why was she like this? She's nothing like what you've told me." Annalyn spoke through her sobs. "Sometimes we discover things about those we're supposed to care for that aren't good for the soul to bear." The man explained in a comforting tone. "Now, come along home. We have much more work to do." He lifted her by the elbow, careful not to touch the runes scribed into the flesh of her arm. He took his jacket and wrapped it around Annalyn as he ushered her out of the house and down the vacant street. "Forget and push forward. Always improving, always climbing higher," he spoke as she walked almost drunkenly beside him in her sorrow. "Let none stand in the way of your purpose." Hey, guess what?
What?
We have a question.
We have a question?
We have a question.
Oh, man.
I think we have two questions.
Do we?
Don't we?
I don't know.
I think it's one question that's two questions.
You're right. Let's pull it up. All right, here's the question. From Ereline, we've got, "Hello again, gentlemen. This time I have a question for each of you."
Oh, it says each of you.
Yeah. First off, in Castaways, will we see any other famous characters from literature? What about the Lost Boys? Will they come into play in this version of Peter Pan? And please don't torture Peter too much. He was my favorite character so far. Well, other than Mrs. Cratchit.
I love Mrs. Cratchit. All right, so will we see other famous characters in literature? Jameson, you can answer that question.
Actually, yes, you'll see quite a few.
Quite a few. You've already seen quite a few.
We've got Robinson Crusoe, basically. I mean, he's more of a real figure than a literature.
Well, Robinson Crusoe is literature. You'll run into Gulliver. However, he's not known by Gulliver. He is known by the name he was known by before Gulliver. So if you want to look that up, you can. You'll run into lots.
Odysseus.
Mm-hmm. He is a very major character. The Lost Boys are not yet. You might see them later on, maybe book 2, but they are not there yet. Because Peter just got there. Will we be mean to Peter? Yes. Will he deserve it? No. Will you hate me for saying that we're going to be mean to Peter? Yes, probably. I mean, he is comatose right now.
Poor Peter.
So, is Atlantis Neverland? Or is the coma Neverland?
Dun dun dun. It's Pokemon theory. Ash doesn't age because he's in a coma.
Ah! Awesome, great question.
All right, on to the second part.
Let me read it for you.
All right, sounds good.
Second, in Eternity Found, could we explore some of the flora and fauna possible in the universe? Yeah, I'm done reading like that. I know we've talked about some different alien species, but what about the plants and animals out there? Heck, one of the alien species was an intelligent plant. It actually does say heck. I know this is a vast question, so maybe pick one planet and give us some more details. Thanks so much, guys. Your ever faithful listener, Arlene.
Thank you, Arlene. Actually, I did delve into some plant life in one of my stories. It was the, let's see, Toddly Ron turn.
Yep, it was the Toddly Ron turn story. You did mention it there in your question, Arlene. There was a plant-like species. So I actually have some background on Arlene. She is a landscape architect. So she's very much into plants. But let's pick a world.
All right.
So Earth is not here.
No.
In Eternity Found. Where do you want to go?
Let's see.
Do we want to go to Space Cthulhu?
Sure. Let's go to Ron's world. I believe we've had Ron's story out. Yeah, I think it was the last one.
I think so.
He was the Decapod story.
He was the Decapod story.
So, Ron lives on I want to say untamed world, but it's very tamed at this point.
Is it called Ronbulus?
No. I think it was Danspar.
I'm not sure. It's like how artists, like musicians, forget their own words. We keep detailed notes and records on each of our things, so we don't forget them.
That we've made.
But it's not exceptionally developed, the world.
Yeah.
Well, it took you long enough.
It's Adven.
Adven, that sounds better.
So the Advena live on Adven. Now, this is a race that once thrived upon hunting the land. They had many different species, kind of similar. So if you take it that we are human beings, and there are animals that have similar traits to us in ways, if not, like skin style, like a pig is the closest to humans with skin, or monkeys are the closest in shape to humans.
Sure.
And things like that. I imagine that plant life tends to take, or not plant life, but animal life tends to take similar forms or in relation to.
Yeah, there's definitely like the equivalent of a pig there. It may not look like our pig. It might be green and not have a snout and be sort of skinny, but fills the same niche in environments. That is actually a theory in sci-fi, is that all forms of life on inhabitable planets goes through the same cycles and fulfills the same niches. So you're going to find a lot of things that you would say, oh, that's their monkey, even though it's scaly, or things like that.
So in the story of Ron, he hunts a deer-like creature. Now these are, I imagine, things that look as if they have moss hanging from their horns. They're big, majestic, muscular figures, as much as you would imagine an elk would be. But their faces wouldn't be as similar. They'd maybe be a little bit flatter, not as long of a snout. But yet their horns would look as if it was part of the landscape.
So it gives them great camouflage. They've definitely adapted to the landscape and to the environment that they're living in, especially since these people used to be exceptional hunters.
The landscape of Advent is very forest. There's not a lot of the world that doesn't have a thick forest, other than that has been civilized, basically, that has been cultivated and turned into purposes for other species that have come.
Yep. So you're going to find, as with every forest, you're going to find trees. Ooh. Surprise!
Yeah.
And vines and things. But they all have definite, distinct characteristics that are they're different than what we know on Earth. I mean, there are some trees that are just like, hey, that's a tree. It's got leaves. Cool. But one of the things, and you can say no to this if you'd like to, but I was thinking what would be really awesome is if the flora of this world didn't lose its leaves during wintertime, but instead they went from a soft leaf to almost scale armor. Hard.
Mm.
And so maybe in the history of the planet, that's what they used for armor or spearheads or arrows, is they would harvest these leaves during wintertime to attach them to weapons. I
like that idea.
I think it'd be fun.
I think that'd be way cool. I really like that. And I think I could use that quite a bit. I do imagine that most of the plants, depending on their region, we have different kinds of trees.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a banana tree, and then look at a real tree.
Banana trees aren't real. You heard it here first.
Okay, banana trees are the strangest things. I don't know why we call them trees, because you can literally take a machete, one swipe without even putting force behind it, and you can slice a thing down. In fact, there are people in the world that eat the tree because they think if the banana's good to eat, then the tree might be good to eat.
If rhubarb's good to eat, then the stalk of rhubarb's good to eat. Don't eat rhubarb stalks. They're poisonous. Well, the leaves are poisonous.
So there's going to be other trees in the world that take different forms, maybe look like giant
redwoods.
Redwoods, and then you have one that looks like a leafy grass that looks as if it's a giant, thick tree.
Mm-hmm. So very much you're going to get a huge diversity of flora as well as fauna, just as much as we have on Earth. So hope that answers your questions, Arlene.
And it'll range from water planets to, I don't like to make one-off planets where a planet is just
one thing.
But if you look at our solar system, that's almost how it is.
Yeah.
You've got gas giants, you've got
rock.
You've got desert planets. You've got Pluto.
Hey, I think Pluto's been reclassified as a planet.
I think so.
I wish we could all be like Pluto in life and not care what other people call us.
Right? Just be yourself and eventually people will accept you.
Yes. After unaccepting you, rejecting you first.
yeah, you'll go through hardships, but come on. It's worth it in the end. Unless they reject you again. And then replace you with Planet X.
Oh, poor Pluto. Anyways, thank you for tuning in.
And as always, we love listening to your questions and answering them. So you can always write in to storyboardpod@gmail.com, like we said.
And if you want to meet us in person, go to MyCon.
And you can buy tickets at mycon.me. That's mycon.m for Montana, E for Excelsior.
That is mycon.m for Manamana, and E for eggs.
Eggs.
Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, we will leave you with
your favorite part ever.
The most wonderful part. What is it called?
The sound hug.
Now in stereo.
I just have 2 microphones.
Oh yeah.
I just gave you a little smooch. How does that feel?
That's a little odd. Don't smudge their ears.
Oh, sorry.
Take it back. Yeah, licking's better. All right, guys. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.